Ébresztő, Mr. Freeman. Ébredjen! Nem azt akarom sejtetni, hogy elaludt munka közben. Rászolgált a pihenésre. Minden törekvése hiába való lett volna, amíg... Nos, az ön ideje eljött újra. A jó ember a rossz helyen. A világon ezen múlhat minden. Keljen fel, Mr. Freeman. Talpra, s lássa, mivé lett a világ.
Nem láttam felszállni. Akárhányszor is telepítettek már át, sosem tudok hozzászokni. Nos, végállomás.
I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2. It's been a long 20 years since its release. In this anniversary... I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2. It's been a long 20 years since... its release. In this anniversary update, we've tried to respond to as many of the community's requests as possible. And while this might not be the absolute #1 request from fans, I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of Half-Life 2's development, but it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with a dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we had the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. And please let me know what you think. You can reach me at gaben@valvesoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Physics objects. It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static, as in they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it. Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
Train station. The beginning of a Half-Life game has a big job to do. We have to introduce players to a new world while teaching them how to interact with it. Players need to quickly grasp what's happening, who the key players are, what threats they face, and how they fit into it all. Above all else, it has to be as fun and interactive as possible. Nailing this takes a lot of iteration and playtesting, especially on the small moments that make up a bigger picture of the game. In this section, we'll highlight some key moments, game design problems, and a few playtests where things didn't quite go as planned.
Ezért, akár itt marad, akár csak átutazóban jár nálunk. Üdv a 17-es városban, itt biztonságosan.
Sweeping Vortigaunt. Another key moment of storytelling and another nod to the physics system. Here we're showing how Vortigaunts fit into this new world, which is a big shift from their Half-Life 1 role as enemies. Like so many moments in Train Station, the sweeping Vortigaunt came from our constant hunt for ways to show characters interacting naturally with a physics system. Why just tell players Vortigaunts are friendly now, when you can show one casually sweeping the floor and knocking around some simulated objects? Nothing signals, hey, don't shoot me this time around, like someone willing to tidy up.
Oly nagyra tartom a 17-es várost, hogy úgy döntöttem, itt
De hát ez mindenem,
rendezem
ami
be a
maradt.
kormányzatomat. A
Jól van,
Citadellában,
megyek
amelyet
már,
ivakaróink biztosítottak. Büszkén nevezem otthonomnak a 17-es várost.
Metro cop shoving citizens. We've only walked a few feet and we're already got problems to solve. We're introducing the Metro Cop, an enemy that eventually we're going to ask players to kill, and giving you a glimpse of the world they're stepping into. It's a simple, clear moment that shows the relationships between the Metro Cops and citizens, and by extension, the player. At the same time, we decided to reinforce the existence of the core physics simulation, showing the way in which NPCs can casually interact with objects in the world. Seeing something like a suitcase knock into another and dislodge was pretty novel back then. These moments at the train station, where we combined multiple goals, were the most successful. They felt natural, like the game wasn't pausing just to teach you a lesson.
Üdvözlöm! Üdv a 17-es városban!
Csak maguk voltak azon a vonaton?
Vagy döntöttek önről, hogy átköltözik városközpontjaink egyik legjobbikába.
Felvigyázók szállították le a férjemet az erdőben. Azt mondták, rajta lesz a következőn. Már nem is tudom, mikor volt. De legalább hagyják, hogy várjak rá.
Büszkén nevezem otthonomnak a 17-es várost. Ezért, akár itt marad, akár csak átutazóban jár nálunk. Üdv a 17-es városban. Itt biztonságosan.
Vigyázzon már!
Citizens. When it came time to design the human citizens of City 17 and the world outside the city, we chose to include a variety of races, ages, and genders. This not only provided narrative context for the Combine's enslavement of all of humanity, but it was also important to us that anyone playing the game could see themselves represented in the Resistance, with everyone on Earth united against the Combine. While we found a number of candidates to use as reference in creating these citizens through our daily lives and connections, we ultimately resorted to advertising in the Seattle Times classifieds to reach the desired range of faces that we'd envisioned.
Büszkén nevezem otthonomnak a 17-es várost. Ezért, akár itt marad, akár csak átutazóban jár nálunk. Üdv a 17-es.
Ne igyon a vízből! Tettek bele valamit, amitől felejt! Azt sem tudom, hogy kerültem ide. Elég ebből. De mindig indulnak, de sosem érkeznek. És azok, amik meg is érkeznek, sosem látni elmenni őket, mindig tele vannak. Soha senki nem száll fel. Látom, a maga bőröngyét is elvették. Ezt nem úszhatják meg! Még bátorságot kell gyűjtenem.
Üdvözlöm! Üdv a 17-es városban!
Dr. Breen? Azt reméltem, a 14-es városban láttam utoljára. Ne olyan hangosan. Ez a műveleti bázisa.
Oly nagyra tartom a 17-es várost, hogy úgy döntöttem, itt rendezem be a kormányzatomat. A Citadellában, amelyet jó akaróink biztosítottak. Büszkén nevezem...
Natural storytelling. To achieve our world building and storytelling goals throughout the train station, we needed a natural way to deliver dialogue without it feeling too gamey or requiring tutorials. We noticed players often approached NPCs to get a closer look, so we turned that into an opportunity for the NPCs to acknowledge the player and deliver their lines. This kept interactions low-key, which was essential since the citizens aren't exactly too cheerful or lively. The simplicity of this approach also aligned with one of Half-Life's core storytelling goals, making the narrative responsive to the player's interest. Some players want to dig into every detail, while others just want to know what to do next. Giving players control over how much story they want to engage with, without it blocking progress, is a goal we always try to maintain in a Half-Life game. Plus, the less complicated a feature is to implement, the more of it we can include.
A Citadellában, amelyet jóakaróink biztosítottak. Büszkén nevezem otthonomnak a 17-es várost.
Mégis hová visznek?
Akár itt marad, akár csak átutazóban jár nálunk. Üdv a 17-es városban. Itt biztos.
Early tech planning. Shipping a game always teaches us a lot. We finally get to find out which choices we made were good ones, and which were ones we should do differently next time. So after Half-Life 1, when we sat down to start thinking about what kind of sequel we could build, we had all kinds of player feedback to digest. From it, we tried to build a master list of things that Half-Life 2 was going to focus on. We didn't try to design a specific player experience. Instead, we found it more useful to approach the question from a technological standpoint. Black Mesa's security guards and scientists had worked well. What could we do if we pushed it really, really hard on characters? We liked our interactive storytelling. What could we build that would allow us to do even more of it, and a greater variety? The exploration and interaction with the Black Mesa was compelling to players. Maybe a physics system would allow us to take that further. In all these areas, we tried to imagine the best version of it could look like years in the future, and back solve from that a set of technological steps that might get us there.
Storytelling. Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining these principles, we'd push ourselves to explore deeper, more interactive storytelling.
Oly nagyra tartom a 17-es várost, hogy így döntöttem, itt rendezem be a kormányzatomat. A Citadellában, amelyet jóakaróink biztosítottak. Büszkén nevezem otthonomnak a 17-es várost. Ezért, akár itt marad, akár csak át...
Szokványos áttelepítési szelvényt kaptam, mint bárki más.
Characters. In Half-Life 1, security guards and scientists could best be described as archetypes, not individuals. They were abstractions of characters that matched the visual fidelity we could achieve at the time. But as our technology improved with Half-Life 2, we saw an opportunity to move beyond abstractions. The increased visual fidelity of the character models, combined with improvements in animation, made us believe we could focus on creating individual characters, people you would actually care about. We allowed ourselves to write real dialogue and have characters deliver it in a way that felt realistic enough for players to not think about them as pawns in a video game, and hopefully propel our narrative forward. In 2001, a couple of years into development, we were energized by Japan Studios' Ico. Directed by an animator, it blew us away with its reliance on characters as the key connection to the player, giving us the courage to keep pushing forward.
Ami azt a sört illeti. Én vagyok az Gordon, Barney a Black Mesából. Hé, bocs az ijesztegetésért. A kamerák miatt muszáj volt. Beépültem a polgárvédelembe. Nem húzhatom az időt, még gyanút fognak. A kínvallatásokkal is el vagyok maradva.
Yes, Barney, what is it? I'm in the middle of a critical test.
Sajnálom, Doki, de ezt nézze.
Great Scott! Gordon Freeman! I expected more warning.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Nos, Barney, mi a szándéka?
Töröm a fejem.
Elix is valahol a közelben van. Bizonyára jobban tudnám, miképp hozzuk őt ide.
Nos, amíg elkerüli az ellenőrző pontokat, rendben leszünk. Doki, nekem mennem kell. Már így is sokat kockáztatunk.
Rendben, és Gordon? Jó látni téged.
Oké, Gordon. Egyedül kell oda találnod Dr. Kleiner laborjához. Ó, ember, pont ettől féltem! Menj be oda, Gordon, mielőtt még lebuktatsz engem! Nincs veszegetni, pakolj egymásra pár lomot az ablak alatt, majd menj a tér felé. Később összefutunk.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player to learn.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are two failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue, which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development, and making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We'd never actually seen players do it. Our playtests of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee. So we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing all the boxes out the window and see what happens.
Blocking Tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the player something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many physics-based objects in the game, blocking this behavior without putting ceilings everywhere wasn't really an option. In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to remind them of it.
Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do. But for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall without taking damage. Second, it introduces a bit of the game's vocabulary, how the game will communicate with them. Players often worry about taking fall damage, but they also worry about taking a step that they can't take back. So here, a welcoming crate to land on signals that dropping down is safe and it's the way forward. And when the crate breaks, it reinforces the physics simulation, and is likely the first time players will see that larger objects can be broken apart.